Do you read me?
Be advised, you are coming in weak and unreadable.
Say again, Com Tower. This is Pacho. Do you read me?
Pacho, this is Com Tower. I read you Lima Charlie.
Com Tower. Request permission to launch and commence the field op. Over.
Stand by. Pacho, permission granted. I say again, permission granted.
Roger that. Launching podcast in 3, 2. You are now entering the field op with your host, Pacho Correa, Chief Warrant Officer 3, United States Marine Corps retired. Get some. Hurrah! Get some. Hurrah! What's going on, everybody? Another amazing week is almost over. Friday night's Eve, baby Friday, but goddamn, it's almost the weekend. We got an amazing show for you, an amazing guest that I happen to lock in through LinkedIn, and she has some amazing tips and a great, really cool story. But let's get all the pleasantries out of the way. Hey, when was the last time that you took a hard look at your finances? Do you know your financial independence number? Do you know where you're currently at, and or where you should be or you want to be? Well, hit me up here at the show. You can put it's all on the show description. You also have my calendar link. Let's have a conversation and see how we can put strategies together that's going to set you apart from everybody else. Because while we all think, especially all service members, that free milk from the VA or your retirement is going to run forever. To some degree, that's likely from the least, because once you pass, your families may not end getting all the entitlements, and that income is going to drastically change. So wouldn't it make sense to put things together that are going to set you apart and ensure that your family and your legacy lives on? Well, hit me up and we can have 1 hour free strategy session. We could go from there. The other thing too is that when was the last time that you took a hard look and see if you're currently still sitting at 10%, 20%, 30, 40, whatever that may be, through the VA? When was the last time that you took a look at your claims, disability claims management, and have you reapplied for higher compensation? If you need help with that, I'll be more than glad to give you a hand with that as well. I don't charge anything. That's just something that I do to pay forward back to my brothers and sisters. As a matter of fact, I'm a Marine Corps veteran here in South Florida. Never applied. Guy's in his 60s at the moment. And he had never applied. Everybody told me, hey, go ahead and apply for your benefits. And, because you never know where you're staying, you should be applying. And he was paying for, co-pays and all this stuff. Well, he just called me today. I got good news. He said, hey, it started out 10% because of my tinnitus and my hearing. And then a week later, I got another letter saying it went up to 40. He's sitting at 60% right now. And plus, because the moment you file, that clock starts ticking. Well, he got a nice lump sum payment that he was actually saying that, hey, with that money, I was able to remodel my bathroom. So listen, even though you may or may not get your initial desired outcome, get 5%, 10%, any type of rating is better than zero or nothing. As a matter of fact, because of that he got that 60%, now he doesn't have to pay co-pays, and now he's got his medical is pretty much free. So, hey, wouldn't it make sense to learn a new skill set? I'm going to teach you how to use AI and apply for your benefits. And that way, because you've earned these, the government took their pound of flesh out of you for however many years you served. I think you rate this and deserve it. So give me a call, let me know, and we can go with that. And look, at the very least, if you want to get into the podcasting game, but the folks at SitchRadio.com, huge shout out to Brian and his team over there. And if you want to be in the podcasting game and get into this, give him a shout out. He'll guide you. He'll walk you through, among many other things. That guy's like my Yoda, my sounding board. So, hey, get a call, get hooked up and see what happens from there. And this show right here is all about, I served for 20 plus years. I protected the Constitution, freedom of speech, right to bear arms, and all the freedoms that the American Constitution brings to us. So if you like what you hear, like, subscribe, and follow. Hit me up on all the other social media platforms. And if you don't like this accent, that's okay too. We can agree to disagree. check something out from sitchradio.com. All right, so that's pretty much all the pleasantries out of the way. So today's episode, I'm going to sit down with an amazing Army veteran, Sanna Garrett-Smith. She's also known as the financial drill sergeant. She's going to knife hand you and get to all your stuff locked in. So before helping individuals and business owners bring order to their finances, she built her foundation in the Army. She served in the 82nd Airborne and also as a drill sergeant. And that experience pretty much shaped her to a leadership, discipline, and execution, principles that she now applies, helping people take control of their financial lives. So we're going to start with her time in the uniform, the leadership, the pressure, the responsibilities of training others. I mean, being a drill sergeant, drill instructor, I mean, it's a very prestigious and something that does, it's not to be taken lightly. And then she transitioned into those same principles into money, business as long-term stability. So, hey, let's welcome everybody. Sanna Garrett-Smith to the show. How you doing, Sanna?
I'm fantastic. Thank you. I'm really grateful, especially being able to speak to veteran audience. I have a lot of respect for those who serve.
That's amazing. And thanks for your time. I mean, being a drill sergeant, and I mean, you have a very prestigious career. I mean, you did it you ended up retiring as, correct me, from sergeant. It was a sergeant major.
No, first sergeant.
First
no,
sergeant.
My husband retired as a sergeant major.
That's awesome. Oh, hey, look, you got somebody saying thank you for your service and all that you do. Thank you so much,
Thank
James.
You.
So
I know
Sanna,
James Dawson.
Oh, you know him?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So Sanna, tell us about your background in the military, and where you served. When did you come in?
I came in August. I'm going to tell my age of 85 and retired in 2005. And, I love helping individuals, especially veterans, entrepreneurs, home-based business owners. I started learning all this stuff when I had I was a young E8 in the Army. I was in it 13 years. So I actually had 7 years left to hone in my skill set. And I got to practice a lot on my soldiers because I couldn't do business with soldiers, but I could teach them about financial literacy. I knew how to make rank really fast because I made E8 in 12 years, E7 in 7 and so forth. But I didn't have the right leadership about money because, I grew up in a very large economically challenged family. And I met a bunch of entrepreneurs when I was very young in the Army. And they showed me how to get an instant pay increase in my paycheck because I was paying over $700 a month in federal taxes. And I had lunch with them and they set me down and showed me how a term called income shifting. I'm not sure if anybody has ever heard of that term. We talked about that a little bit, Francisco, about moving the money that people are paying in taxes, federal taxes, into their paycheck. And that was what I call a SEE, a significant emotional event. And, as growing up as a first sergeant, I would look at my soldiers' paychecks and notice that they was paying a lot of money in taxes, and even them transitioning out of the Army into civilian life, either they get a job or start a business or some kind of side hustle, but they don't have any money that really teaches them. Because in the Army, they didn't teach us financial literacy. We would send soldiers to ACS or AER if they had check writing problems, or creditors would call my company telling me that they didn't pay their bills. And we say, pay your bills, even though they're not supposed to do that. So I started teaching the power of the Form W-4. I worked in HR for 20 years. I worked at the Pentagon for the Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, actually Colin Powell, when I was a young soldier. I'm telling my age for real now.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get through all that. I want to kind of preface your sort and your military career.
Yeah.
So, but what led you, during that time frame? I came here to the U.S. in the 80s. I know we had, Ronald Reagan was serving around that time frame. What led you, or I guess what guided you to join the Army at that time?
Well, I grew up in a very large, economically challenged family. There were 11 of us. And wow. I'm number 7 out of 11. And both my parents, we didn't grow up with much. And I knew I had to get out of that. I grew up in Michigan, in Detroit on the east side. So I knew I had to get out of there. And I was out of the 11 kids, pretty much only one of 2 of us even made it out of that kind of environment. I'm going to be transparent. A lot of people think I woke up like this, but I didn't. And a lot of my siblings ended up dying early. Parents died early. And I just decided, hey, I was going to take ROTC and go in the Army. I came in as an E3 and said, hey,
Oh,
I
wow.
thought at the rank that I came in, because I took ROTC for 4 years, I played a lot of sports in high school. So I thought my
Okay.
first paycheck coming in as an E3, it was like $1,200, $1,500. I said I was going to stay in the Army forever because that was the most money I had, I ever had. And as I started hanging around other leaders, they told me what I needed to do to get promoted to make rank really fast, because I was in HR. And they said, oh, that's it. You sitting behind the desk. You got to go do hard stuff, do things that other people don't want to do. I'm like, what do I have to do? You need to go jump out of the airplane. You need to go be a drill sergeant. Then you need to rappel out of helicopters.
And
And
when you were
so,
going through all those hard, because I mean, and by the way, I never got the pleasure of jumping out of airplanes.
oh, you
uh,
ain't missing that.
I mean, hey, look, I've had a knee replacement, and jumping out of vehicles is bad enough as it is. But
Oh,
what
wow.
did what did the assault training, as well as when you're going through, even as a drill sergeant, I mean, what did that teach you mentally and physically, and how did that correlate, later on as you were applying, through what you currently do now?
Well, getting on the fast track, doing the things, doing what I had to do today so I could do what I wanted to do tomorrow. I had that mentality with, in order to, be ahead of my peers because of the field that I was in. It wasn't like it was infantry or something like that. So very few people would jump out of an airplane or go drill sergeant in my field. So I was able to be ahead of my peers because I was doing the hard jobs. And I'm real athletic. I was real athletic. So everything that I was doing was actually outside. So I really enjoyed that because I mean, I like the desk job, but not like that. I realized, I didn't want to sit behind the desk all the time. So those things that other people consider challenging were not challenging to me because I like being outside anyway. And I played sports my whole life. So, and plus I had 7 brothers. So I was a tomboy growing up anyway. And so being in those tough, jobs that people said they were tough, but they were actually fun to me. Drill sergeant, being able to transform someone, taking them in from as a private and train them over 8 weeks and transition them to a soldier. That was very fulfilling to me. That was actually my best job I had, being a drill sergeant. To me, 82nd was okay. I wasn't too crazy after jumping out of airplanes, but
Right.
transitioning and training soldiers. And from there, I went from South Carolina to North Carolina, from North Carolina to South Carolina to be a drill sergeant. But being on 82nd Airborne Division, I was in division headquarters and division finance. And see, we would get a 3-day holiday. That was great for us if someone within 30 days didn't get, it is what it is, killed on the flight, on the jump. So I was in the tough jobs because in 82nd, there wasn't many female NCOs, especially at E6 or E7. I don't know what the Army ranks are structure. Sergeant first class in 82nd back then was pretty big stuff. I had made E6. And so there wasn't very many females in 82nd. So that's how you just got to be out there and be up front and do the hard things. And those 12-mile road marches and having those night jumps, they wasn't easy either. So I figured I'd go do something easier by being a drill sergeant. But while I was there, I decided to go air assault and rappel out of helicopters. I don't know what was going on with me.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
went,
I guess one thing that it told us in the Marines is never volunteer for anything. But it seems like you were just like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. Hey, we need a body to jump out of helo. You're like, okay, that's
well,
me.
I enjoy doing those things, and because it was outdoorsy and going to Soldier of the Month, Soldier of the Quarter, all those boards, and the leadership
Okay,
really saw my tenacity and maxing out my physical fitness tests. I was very physical because I played sports my whole life. So the
right.
Army could tell me to be at formation at 5. I didn't mind being there at 4 o'clock because I was, no matter what happened, I was never going to go back to Detroit to that lifestyle. So the Army could never ask me to do too much because I was so grateful to get out of the type of toxic environment, if you will, that I grew up in. School was my safe haven while I was at home. And I went straight from high school straight into the Army. I only took 2 months, June and August, I was gone. August 2nd, 85.
So, given that you want to get out of those that environment, obviously, from when you were younger, and then now you're in a completely game change in the sense being in the military. It seems like you found your niche and your home. That hey, you know what? Despite of what happened to or the where I grew up and everything else, that doesn't define me. I'm gonna make the best out of this. I'm gonna excel 110%. Is that pretty much accurate?
Yeah, just connected myself with the right people. I had all the great leadership, and I hung around all E8s and E9s, and they told me, what I needed to do to get promoted. Because if you want to see where your future at, just count your closest five friends, and you're number six. So I associated with myself with people that was going where I was going and doing what I wanted to do. But I was always curious about money, part time. So always got me as a young person. Always had me some type of home based business part time. I know our tag said U.S. Army, which stands for Uncle Sam ain't released me yet, but part time I still did something, some type of business, because I just didn't have the right leadership with that part of it. But they had the Army down pat.
And so you were obviously advancing through the ranks, and when you and I spoke, and seeing that soldiers or service members, obviously, taxes are taxes. We're kind of pivoting, which so how did you start or get into a path of where you're at today in regards to in finances and taxes, and so what was that beginning like?
That's a great question, because when I met these people, I was in Hawaii. Had made EA. I went to Hawaii. I was a single parent with two kids, and my daughter's father had flew over there to see me, and he enrolled me in this business, and I was selling a bunch of products and services and stuff, and I was paying a little over $700 a month in federal taxes, and I was giving these meetings and stuff part time during the evening. And I started building this company during my spare time. Once I got off, because I worked at for Disapac. I still was with the Pentagon, but it was just in Hawaii on Schofield. And so when I started teaching this, I started making a lot of money. And these folks, these millionaires, they flew to Hawaii to meet me. And so they saw me present, and then they told me to bring my pay stub. Back then, everybody in the military knows the LES. Bring this gentleman walked up to me and told me to bring my LES.
Leave an earning statement.
Yep, leave an earning statement. That's correct. Yeah. And I worked in HR, so I'm in a meeting downtown Hawaii. I'm like, why do you need my pay stub? I mean, y'all flew over here to see me. I was young, then I made E8 in 12 years, so I thought I was hot stuff. And so he walked back up to me, and we was in front of all these people, and he told me, he looked at me, he said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. If you learn how to shut up and listen, you might learn something. I told you that story before. I was embarrassed, quite frankly, but I didn't say anything. And this is my first financial literacy mentor, who's 17 years older than me. At the time, I didn't know he was going to be my mentor. I just want to know, why do you need to see my LES? We're in a meeting about business, about money. What does that got to do with anything? Well, when he said that to me, and I went to lunch with him the next day, I was kind of upset because I was embarrassed. My ego was a little bruised, because, you got to have your ego stroked a little bit in the military. You think you hot stuff until somebody bring you down a notch. And so I went to lunch and handed him my pay stub, and he handed me a Form W-4. That was my introductory to business, actually how business worked, because I couldn't correlate what did my pay stub have to do with my business. So he handed me a Form W-4, and I gave him my LES, and he said, if you own a business and why are you paying and you work in HR, why are you paying almost $700 a month in federal taxes? And I told him everybody pays taxes. And he said, no, poor middle class people pay taxes. What he said to me, I was like, whoa. And then he proceeded to ask me, and he was in the military too. He was actually a captain in the Army. And all these people that trained me were prior military people as well. And he asked me, had I heard of the acronym IOF? And I said, no. He said, well, your ignorance on fire. So insult number 2. And so he's asked me, hey, you got to stop selling things and start teaching people about money and why it's important to own a business. And when you give them a pay raise and put money more in their paycheck before you do anything, they'll follow you to the end of the earth. And it still hadn't clicked yet, And so by the time he finished walking through that Form W-4 form with me, And it was about 2 hours at this restaurant. And I went from paying over $700 a month as a single parent with 2 kids down to $28 a month. And at the end of the year, I still got $2,000 to $3,000 back in my tax return. That was mind blowing for me. And I started sharing that information with my soldiers, and it two things happened. I quit get calls for creditors, and soldiers got a pay raise. And it got up to my chain of command, and I went through the Form W-4. And we're HR. I worked at the reception battalion before I retired in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And the civilians didn't know how to teach this form either. And soldiers would come through there paying $400, $500, $600 a month in federal. And so I started teaching this to the civilians, because can you imagine a young kid coming in the military and they got 4 kids and they paying $400 or $500 a month in federal, how that would impact them if we just show them how to properly fill it out. And that was a big turning point, teaching this information to my soldiers, because we didn't get this kind of training. We would send soldiers to ACS and AER, Army Emergency Relief, Army Community Services, those programs for, writing bad checks so people didn't know how to manage their money. And even as a drill sergeant, we would have small financial classes on how to manage a checkbook and stuff like that, but nothing significant where a soldier can learn how to invest their money, how to put it in the thrift savings plan, how to get 8 to 10% rate of return, just teaching financial literacy. We didn't have that. Maybe the officers did have a little or something, but we didn't, as the law enlisted.
And so why do you think most people feel overwhelmed with their finances, or they struggle with it? Why is that? I mean, obviously, and you just touched some, one of the things is lack of education, but why else?
Well, I call it, that's a great question. And here's where I feel like a lot of people go wrong. They don't really control. I call it having 10,000 meals with the wrong financially literate people. Because here's the deal. See, I didn't choose, you didn't choose. We don't choose who our parents are, our grandparents, our uncles, aunts, cousins, the teachers, people that influence us. So if you don't grow up with someone teaching you this stuff, and they certainly aren't going to teach it in school, who's going to work the jobs? I call that indoctrination. To go to school, you're getting indoctrinated, not educated. Yep. Not that I'm just saying how I feel about it. And
you're 100% right. To your point is that there was a change in at the turn of the century where the Rockefellers got involved in the school system and basically said, "Hey, I'm not here to create independent people and free thinkers. I'm here to create."
That's correct. That's 100% correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
When you realize that, and I realized I got to connect myself. I was great at connecting myself with leadership in the Army with how to get promoted, but I didn't have anybody to guide me financially. So I realized I got to get me these people who flew over to Hawaii. They were my first introduction with paying less taxes and how the tax game worked. And once I started learning how that whole system worked, and how, if you make a lot, if you don't know how to fill this one form out, you're giving the government an interest-free loan, and they're taking your money and investing it at an 8% rate of return. And they give you something back at the end of the year that's already yours, because no one taught you this. This is a funny story I'm going to tell you real quick. My daughter was in junior high school. She was in 6th or 7th grade, something like that. And they had a career week, and I would go up there sometimes for career week. And they told her she got to pick a job. And the teacher said, "I'm not gonna pick a job." And so the teacher said, she said, "I'm going to own the business." The teacher said, "No, you got to get something for real." So my daughter said, "Wait a minute, don't the teacher make about $50,000 a year?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, why would I want to cap my income when I can make the sky's the limit?" And so the teacher told her, entrepreneurship, being a business owner, that's not nothing real. You're not going to get nothing steady, no steady income. She said, "Well, why wouldn't I want to have somebody working for me rather than me doing all the work myself?" So she ended up, make a long story short, being sent to the principal's office.
Yeah, I bet that went over well with the teacher.
and I had to go up there and explain that she was financially literate, that she knew about money. She knew about compound interest. She knew how to invest. She had been dripped on. See, she got what I didn't get. So I started teaching her this stuff, and she was doing my bookkeeping for my business since she was about 6 or 7 years old, learning how to do bookkeeping as a kid. And that's what paid her way through college. So I went to see the principal and explain to him. I said, "How much are you paying in taxes?" He was paying almost $2,000 a month in federal taxes. And I went through his form with him. And when we got home, she was like, how come people that are grown don't know this stuff? And I'm a kid. And I said, you know, they didn't control who raised them, Keontae. You got lucky. You had somebody that can teach you at this stuff at this early age. They didn't. She went from being mad to having more empathy and compassion for them because she thought everyone knew this. And sure, certainly if they was an adult. And so I was like, no, that's not how the world works. It's who you're around in your environment that you put yourself in. That's saying birds of a feather really do flock together. You're a product of your environment. So being able to get exposed to this the earlier, the better. And I've met people who 70, 80 years old and have never heard of the stuff that I'm talking about. And I've had older people tell me, well, it's too late for me. No, I don't think it's ever too late. Because if you could look up, you can get up. And this is stuff you can pass on to your grandkids. You should leave an inheritance to your children's children. If you could leave that knowledge, they could feed themselves. So the information that I share with people, instead of just being a tax preparer, I'm a personal financial success strategist. I'm teaching you about your finances, and so that you can take care of yourself year round, not just 90 days out the year. And there's so many people that even transition out of the Army. They don't know what they're going to do. They get another job and they hate paying taxes, but it's that Netflix every Friday and go to a job, go to work, get paid, pay the bills. And, on a Sunday night, most people are having heart attacks. Why? Because they don't want to go to work on Monday. Not saying anything is wrong with a job, but a job, we're conditioned as a society, like you said earlier, indoctrination, go to work, pay your bills, go to school, get a good job, penny pinching, you'll be all right somewhere down the road. How far down the road? At some point, we were not put on this earth just to work a job.
100%.
We're put on this earth to create, not sit in the cubicle every day and do the things that really makes us happy. I know you have to feed your family. And I waited my last 7 years. I learned all these things and got me a mentor. And I was able to walk out of the Army in 2005 and not have to work another job. I'm what you call, and so are you, Francisco, psychologically unemployable.
I told my brother that, and because he's been going through something, and he's been an entrepreneur pretty much all his life, and he was pondering maybe because we all hit a bump on the road, and he was like, man, I don't know if I should go back to. I'm like, dude, I'm gonna hit you with a term that I just learned the other day, but you and me are both psychologically unemployed. He goes, huh? And I explained, like, oh, it's like, yeah, you're. So
he said, huh?
He said, huh? And, I mean, it was like, and he just told me this afternoon. We had a conversation regarding that. But so you talk about, one of the things in the conversation we talked about is, regardless of what you have, whatever type of side hustle, there's a lot of people out there. I remember when I was with my kid's mom, she did for a while Tastefully Simple, the parties and cook food, whatever. But any of those little things, having any type of side business, and I know you also can help provide anybody just that that check in the box so that they can get these benefits. But tell me a little bit about how having those things and the advantages of having just something on the side can give you these tax benefits.
Right. And I love doing this for veterans, especially when they transition out of the military. They're going to do what? Get a part-time, get a job or a part-time business, or go full-time business or whatever. But either way you decide to go, you got to know the tax game. And let me explain why I say that. If you get a job, you have to file taxes. You don't have to pay taxes. And I'm not talking about tax avoidance. I'm talking about learning the game. Because if you got a job and you making whatever amount, $50,000, $60,000 a year, if you don't properly fill out that form W-4, and there's 4 pages to that form, I'm going to the job and the business after this. And so with a job, the form is confused. The IRS is designed to keep people ignorant, afraid, and scared. Like when I was in the military, we if anybody told me I was doing anything wrong, I would go to the regulation. And so what I'm going to reference is publication 463 from irs.gov. And if you have a job, most people don't know this. They get it wrong, because if you got a job and you got a business part-time and you only require by law to work your business 3 hours a week, the losses from your business filters through to your form W-4. And what that means is you get to pay less taxes in your job. But if no one ever explained that form W-4 form to you, you can't play the game. You wait to the whole year and pay taxes and get money back that's already yours, while the government took your money every month and invested at 8% rate of return. Read your tax return, because when people getting their taxes done, they only care if they owe or get money back, and the people filing your tax only care about getting paid because they're tax preparers. I'm a tax advisor. And so at a job, the more you make, if you don't fill that form out properly, most people don't know, if I got a business, I don't have to pay federal tax. Or if I got a business and a house, because that form will show you how not to legally, morally, and ethically. And people that have a business, your job is the proper documentation. This is the biggest thing I see. A lot of people, they have these hobbies, they call them hobbies, and they'll say, well, and that's why I do my free tax assessment audit on their last year's tax return. Is I'll look at their tax return, and the person will say, well, I sold Mary Kay. I'm just giving an example. It can be any home-based business.
Right.
They say I did whatever business. And they say, but I didn't make that much money, or I sold t-shirts. Well, I didn't make, it was my little side. People call it little. See, when you treat your business like a business, you get business money. When you treat it like a hobby, you get hobby money. But what they don't know, that business, whether if they made money or not, the government says you must be in pursuit of an income, meaning you talk to somebody.
Right.
So let me give you an example. If I took you to lunch, even if I had a job and worked my business, my side hustle, they call it part-time, which is really a business, they're entitled to over 400 tax deductions. So if you called me and say, Sanna, I want to take you to lunch, and from your house to your job is not tax deductible. But from your job to that restaurant, your phone bill and that travel, you get 70 cents for every mile you drive your car. The bottom line is you're going to drive your car anyway. Why not convert it to a business expense? Now, whether if I bought your product or not, it's not even relevant. The fact of the matter is that I spoke business to you and I attempted to make a profit. Therefore, that same thing that I was going to do as a W-2 employee that I could not write off, I can now write off as a business owner. So you convert your life, your lifestyle to a business by doing those things and being in pursuit of an income and properly documenting those expenses. Because the IRS want to know the who, the what, the when, and the where. Because if you saying I drove 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 miles and you can't log that and show proof, then it's going to really be considered a hobby. Then it really is a hobby. That's a little thing you're doing that you didn't know the value of it. And when you see the value of having those things and how you can convert your lifestyle and document those things and put everything in order, you don't care about getting audited by the IRS because you audit proof your business. And I didn't say avoid it. I said audit proof, meaning have your documentation. Who cares if you get audited? If you're doing what you're supposed to do and you know the rules, it doesn't matter. That's why I used to tell my soldiers in the Army, who cares about getting ready for Inspector General inspection, IG inspection, when you should be supposed to be doing what you're doing anyway. Anybody should be able to walk in and say, let me see your stuff. And while you knowing the regulation, you could walk with confidence, knowing, okay, audit me.
I mean, we use a CPA guy, and it's funny that you mentioned about the audit, because on the mileage thing, for example, I'm like, well, I drove more than I think the max, bless you, I think the max is like $5,000 or something. I forget what you know the number, but he says, well, you don't want to claim more than that because it may trigger an audit. And you almost answered the question that I was going to ask, is what are some of the common mistakes or myths that you hear when you're helping a soldier or anybody for that matter, as to they're afraid to make these deductions or whatever because of this whole audit thing, and how can we make that better for them, so they're like, hey, you know what, I am going to do this.
That's another awesome question, because a lot of people go by what they said. I call little Ray Shaniqua, the mailman up the street. They go by what people say versus doing their own due diligence. And I can tell you, I've been in business for over 30 years. And Bill and I mentioned this to you before, that Warren Buffett pays less taxes and he reports the loss than his secretary. You see, because it's not how much you make that counts. It's how much you keep. And more importantly, what you do with what you keep. When you document your expenses, if you don't make a profit, when I say a profit, let's say, for example, you made $500, but your expenses was $15,000. That's a negative $14,000 paper loss that will be reported to the IRS. That's called a paper loss. And let's say you do that. People say, oh, I can't do that more than 3 years in a row. Who told you that? That's going to trigger an audit. And oh, by the way, I don't know if everyone knows this, and I don't talk bad about any type of industries because I trained, especially in the tax industry, IRS people. I've trained people that worked at Liberty Tax and H&R Block. And by the way, CPAs are not trained, guess what, on home-based business deductions, by the way. I don't know if
Really?
anyone knew that, but they're not trained on that. And so when you start talking about people remember I told you earlier, the IRS want to keep most people ignorant, afraid, and scared. Well,
Yeah.
I've been reporting expenses and billing our six-figure income earners, and I haven't been reporting the paper loss for a long time. But I have all of my documentation because if you still made $1,000 from your business, but your losses outweigh that, and you have your documentation, that's what they're looking for. I mentioned earlier to you before that I had a lady come and she owned a beauty salon school. She came in my office with this big plastic bag full of receipts. And her uncle had been doing her taxes for a long time, over 30 some years, her uncle. And she got audited. And she heard my radio ad. She came in and we took all her stuff and put it in a log and documented the who, what, when, and where. We got the software to help people do this and document their expenses. And then we role played with her. And she went in there owing $30,000, but left out of there owing only $150.
Oh, wow.
Because you got to have proper documentation. And it's not a time frame. If it's after 3 years and you haven't shown a profit, you may have made money, but your expenses are more than your money that you made. That's called a paper loss. Now, it's a form called the Schedule C for business owners,
Right.
sole proprietors, and LLCs that we fill out for folks. That with our software, we have our software mirror that paperwork so that when you're documenting and doing what you're supposed to do, it's not a time limit. That's a myth on how long you can write off expenses and how many miles. That's a lie. I've seen people,
wow.
I've documented mileage. I've had my mileage for 30, 40,000 miles. If I'm running up and down the highway and I got my who, what, when, and where, and I'm eating lunch and I'm feeding people, I've spent in 1 month on just expenses for meals, for taking clients out to lunch, over $2,500 or $3,000. But I got documentation. So that is a myth. There's nothing to say, oh, you're going to get audited if you. Now, what I do see that's tricky, that I see people doing, it's a red flag. And actually, that's how I got into the tax industry. I told you this too, Francisco, is making up fake things, putting fake numbers on there, because that's what happened to me. How we got into this industry is not having a proper documentation. And I was doing mortgages. I was a mortgage broker for 8 years. I got out of the Army, went in that industry. And I started teaching about how to buy a house and refinance a house and freeing up money, and people paycheck by that term called income shifting. And people, this guy that I hired that worked for me in my mortgage company for 7 years, this form Schedule C, if you're not familiar with that form, it can make or break you. And he created a fake Schedule C for a bunch of soldiers and was giving them a fake business. Now this did trigger an audit, because he was putting in zero income and $20,000 worth of deductions on things that the soldiers never even had a business. So that did trigger an audit. Yes, that did look fishy. If you got $30,000, come on, let's be realistic about this. And you reporting zero income, zero. I can see if you had 5,000, you had $30,000 worth of losses, and then that makes you have a $25,000 paper loss. That's different. But when we're talking about reporting your income on the Schedule C, this is the paperwork where you show the IRS, hey, this is how much I made from my business. When you put a zero there, this is an audit. This is definitely will trigger an audit, and it did.
That's pretty much popping red smoke on the LZ.
Come on. How you gonna spend $30,000 on expenses and make not one dime? That did 100% trigger an audit, and they ended up calling, guess who, me. He did that for 7 years. He was charging these young soldiers $1,000, $1,500 to do their taxes. He was getting them $10,000, $15,000 back, and they got audited. Guess who they called? Me. And so I looked at their tax return, and sure enough, that did trigger an audit, because they didn't even know they had the business, number one, and they never knew what documentation they needed because they didn't know what a Schedule C was. And so I called him, And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it." He ended up not calling them back and keeping up with them. And I felt so bad for these soldiers because I had did mortgages for them. I just referred them to them.
Right.
And I ended up, that's how I ended up going into the mortgage industry. When my husband was retiring, I said, "Hey, you should go take the 10-week tax class, and we got to help these young soldiers because they all got audited." So
Did
it's
they
nothing
get
to play with and take that lightly. And we ended up inherited about 200 soldiers. That's how I ended up going from mortgages straight to the tax industry because I knew about taxes. And he defrauded the government out of, I think it was $51 million in the 7 years. He's in jail now, the 7 years he worked with me. So
he
that is
should,
real. Auditing
yeah,
is real.
Shortcuts don't win anybody. As we're
No,
getting ready to
that's right. The hookup is not always the hookup.
a habu, as I call it, hook a brother up. So what
Well,
advice
see,
would you
that's
give
new one for
someone?
me. I never heard of that.
Yeah, I learned that one a couple about right before I retired. I was like, habu. I'm like, yeah, hook a brother up. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna use that. So what advice would you give someone who feels stuck financially and is looking for, hey, something easy, something that is, in this line of work, doing finances, and we all, we also do onboarding and grow our team base as well. People want it easy. People don't, so what would be something easy that they, say, hey, Sanna, I just don't have the quote unquote time to do this. What would be something that they can get into and that will give them those tax advantages as well, so that they can keep some of that money in their pocket and not have to pay Uncle Sam all of that?
I would definitely look at what I call reverse engineering. And the reason why I say that, I'll look at where people are at, where you at right now. And by doing that, looking at your financial paperwork. And here's what a lot of people don't do. They don't take the time to set up a proper infrastructure. If you're considering going there, they'll jump out there and start selling stuff. And then they won't do the paperwork end of it. Or they don't know how. And they're not connected with the right people to show them. Now, most people don't realize this is the most important part right here. Is to first look at where you at. Get with someone who's financially literate, such as yourself or me. Somebody could sit down and look at your paperwork and where you are. Like, if you want to invest, I would go to somebody that know about investing, wouldn't you? When you say that's wiser than go to little Ray or your cousin or the guy up the street and get his advice. So you got to connect yourself with the right people. And for me, I would recommend it. Let's see where you are at with your first thing I'm gonna look at is your tax return, because I'm gonna see where you got those holes and leaking at. Because my mentor, he sold insurance, and that's how I got to knowing a lot about money, is because his biggest problem was people would love his presentation. He loved to hear what he had to say, but unfortunately they didn't have the money to invest. The first place you want to look is where's the holes coming out? What are you spending money on? How much you paying in federal taxes? How much of your money is coming out in federal taxes? Because there's a way to fix that, to create the money to invest or start the business. And most people don't realize that. That's the first place I would start with. Where can we create the money, the capital, to even start and decide what you want to do? And here's the capital, having that money to create that, and then putting some of that money away once you get going and paying yourself first.
That's amazing. No, and being able to, because when you're bleeding out all over the place, I mean, then they're like, because people have a lot of stuff, they have a lot of things. However, we all know that one $3,000, $4,000 emergency that month, that bow, it's not going to do anything for you. Where can people, as we're getting close to wrap up, and man, we can talk about this. We may have to bring you back another time and just dive a little deeper. But if people want to, I know you can help them, implement an easy business that will give them these benefits and everything. Where can people find you and they want to get more information? Hey, Sanna, I would love to learn more. Can you help me out with my taxes? Or I want a lot of these benefits that you talked about during this show. Where can people go and find you?
Okay, if you're listening, you're on this podcast, and you want to determine what if you got a side hustle, how can you convert that? If you're not sure what you have structured properly, or if you're leaving money on the table, I do offer a free tax assessment, which is normally valued at $198, where we review your situation, show you what you may be missing. In some cases, we catch people that's leaving anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 on the table. It's crazy. And it's simple, no pressure. It's just education, so you could make an informed decision on where you're going. Just have somebody look at what you got already. You know.
Okay. And is there
I'm
any
at
social
BCT Tax
media?
Center. Yeah, I'm on all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. But my website address, you can make an appointment. I sent you the link to bcttaxcenter.com. B as in boy, C as in cat, T as in Tom, bcttaxcenter.com. You schedule an appointment and we give you a $200 restaurant voucher. We prepare your taxes if you want to move forward. And after that, we give you a free vacation to over 125 locations worldwide. It's our way of saying thank you. And we went from serving our country to serving our community. And we love helping people. Just get checked out first if you don't do anything else, because you could create that extra money in your paycheck to start investing with the right people, right, Francisco?
Yes, hey, but yeah, but like you said, and by the way, I'm not a tax person. I play one on TV a couple of times, but if for tax stuff, hey, Sanna is your drill sergeant, and she'll get you all taken care of, and she'll get you straight. So definitely, start out there, and then whatever after that, then we can start building, the other things that infrastructure that will set you free. You know what I'm saying?
That's the key. Yes.
Sanna, thanks
you
so much for your service. Thank you so much for what you do.
Same to you.
We'll definitely bring you back. So, hey, hoorah, get some, and we'll see you again.
Hoorah.
Hoorah.
Thank you.
Hey, by the way, if you want to get, I did post the website is Bravo Charlie Tango BCTTaxCenter.com. Make sure you hit them up. Their website is amazing. There's a lot of resources that you can, and you inquire about on there. As a matter of fact, they have another tool that you can implement and put in all your receipts, your mileage, your this or that. So hit them up, get your free consultation. I mean, hey, it's free. And then you can go from there. And if it makes sense, amazing. Because that's what we do here at the Field Up. We connect with everything. So before we go, if you've been struggling with rumination and just kind of going into that dark hole where you can't get out of, hey, hit me up at the show. I have a lot of resources I could connect you with. You just want to talk, I can do that too. I mean, pretty much this phone right here sits right next to my bed. And I do have veterans in the middle of the night that just give me calls and we get you all taken care of. So, but at the end of the day, everybody is call somebody. There's VA hotline. There's the Military One Source, TRICARE. I mean, there's just a lot of things out there that we just don't want you to be a statistic. So with that being said, everybody, hey, an amazing show, amazing guest. So this is the time to end it. So, all right, get some. I'll see you next week. I'm out.